Hello, everybody, and welcome to the MiC Inspires sessions. So I'm Mary Cheney. I am the chairwoman and CEO of Minorities in Cybersecurity. Thank you for joining us. For those that are here live, for those that are watching this on either our YouTube or Facebook channel, thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to our channel, and then you'll get the updates and everything like that. Of course, the MiC Lead Aspires program is sponsored by AWS. Today we have Tanisha Martin, who is awesome. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself because she does a lot, and what we're talking about today is not necessarily everything that she knows. So I'll let her introduce herself. Tanisha is a graduate of the MiC Lead Communicators course, so she's been around for a while, and it's a pleasure to have her here, to join us here, and for the next couple of sessions as we talk about several topics of discussion for her. So I'm going to let Tanisha go ahead and introduce herself. I'm going to go off camera. You go ahead and you take it over.
Awesome. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. Can you see that? Hopefully you're good to go.
Yes, we're good.
Okay. I am Tanisha Martin. I'm very excited to be here. I absolutely love Mary, and I am also a graduate of her communicators program, which was extremely valuable. So when you guys finish with this one, you can progress in your career. I highly suggest that you take it up because we learned a lot of great information. So the topic I'll be talking about today is, what does it mean to be a cybersecurity consultant? So as Mary alluded to, I do a lot of things. I am a manager at a Fortune company of data analytics. I manage a team of, I think, maybe 30 or 40 people at this point, but I feel like it's growing every other day. I am a former security consultant / associate security consultant, which I did for 2 years. But as a consultant, especially in the government contracting capacity, I have been doing that. I had done that for 15 plus years. So it's a very long time. So I'm very familiar with the way that it works as a cybersecurity consultant. I have several masters in cybersecurity, digital forensics, and then certifications in security, PMT, ITIL, and then some penetration testing specific certifications. But functionally, I am a pen tester. So what is a cybersecurity consultant? Sometimes a cybersecurity consultant is called a security analyst. Sometimes it's called a pen tester. But in general, it's just a generalist within the cybersecurity field. It's a catch-all title that basically says that you may be asked to solve any number of problems at any point in time. The one thing that I can say for serving in a government consulting in a consulting capacity for so long is that you typically don't have the same problems day after day. It's generally new problems that you get to learn. So you always get to expand your skill sets. But in general, cybersecurity consultants are expected to assess risks, run risk assessments, review code, identify vulnerabilities, create reports, provide suggestions and guidance, share your experience, implement security policies, procedures, and best practices, and provide guidance to help clients develop and implement strategies. But above all else, you are literally being hired to solve problems, okay? People generally have a cybersecurity consultant come in when they're not able to tackle whatever their problem is, whether it be big or small, in-house, whether that means that they don't have the resources or it means that they don't have the capabilities within their current organization. So they literally hire consultants to be able to solve problems. So, above all else, your ability to problem solve and think about different ways to approach a problem are going to be some of the most valuable skills that you'll be able to bring to a possible career as a cybersecurity consultant. So what are the education certification requirements? Most companies require a bachelor's degree in a technical field or demonstrated experience in consulting. So I have literally seen people who have, for example, no certifications, no not certifications, no education, like no, bachelor's degree, associate's degree, things of that nature, but they've got experience in the field. And then I've also seen people who are very educated who do consulting work as well, right? So really, you're being hired for your ability to solve problems. But what they might look for as far as certifications or education requirements really depends on the company. So some of the common ones I've seen, they want you to have the GSEC, which is basically like the securities fundamentals that is offered by SANS, Security Plus, which is a foundation level certification. ISC Squared has one now called Certified in Cybersecurity. There's a lot of different certifications that they may want you to have. It really depends on what you functionally, behave as. So for me, I was a pen tester, so they expected me to have things like pen testing related certifications, like the GWAP or like certified professional network, certified professional what is it called? PNPT, Cyber Mentor Certification, Professional Network Penetration Tester. And then if you see a company that wants you to have a CISSP as a security consultant, especially if they're looking for not a lot of years of experience, like not a senior level, I would run. Because generally, whenever people say, hey, I have a cybersecurity position that needs to be filled, the catch-all for that is a CISSP, which is a certification that you need 5 years of experience to be able to do. But it's generally required for managers and not necessarily security consultants, right? So I have here an example requirements list from a job that I just pulled off of Indeed. They want you to have, like I mentioned, bachelor's in computer science, computer engineering, or related field, and they're willing to consider related industry experience in place of a degree, right? So the industry is getting a lot more accepting of the fact that people come to cybersecurity consulting from different places. So this particular job wants 5 or more years of experience, strong knowledge of best practices, experience with security assessment tools and techniques. But for the most part, you need to have like a general understanding of security risks and threats. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest parts when we're talking about educational or experience background. So what hard skills are they looking for? Some of them look for computer programming and coding. I can tell you that you don't necessarily need to, be able to develop, like, for example, web apps or like, put together like complex programs as much as you need to be able to just review the code to see if there's any thing that jumps out to you as far as security vulnerabilities, right? So you don't have to be like a master programmer. Like, for example, if you were getting a software engineering job, but you just need to be able to, know how security vulnerabilities pop up into code, especially if you're analyzing a language like C++, for example. Network and security configurations, encryption technologies, but most of these things are very much so just cybersecurity fundamentals. So it's important that you kind of are a jack of all trade, but like I said, you're a generalist. So you're expected to know, a little bit of everything, but not necessarily anything very strongly in one typical area. So some of those other areas are incident handling, understanding of threats, a good grasp on the types of vulnerabilities that are out there, IT skills, and then database skills. No, not necessarily like, hey, I know how to manage and do all of the things for a database, but maybe just like I know how to get information out of a database if I need to, right? And I know how to securely store information. For example, if a password is stored in a database in clear text, then that's a problem, right? So just being able to identify those types of activities. So again, I have a listing from a job that was available on Indeed, and it talks about how you're building out security policies, training awareness programs, setting up policies for Office 365, Azure tenants, cloud things, data breach investigations. Depending on where you are trying to work, what it looks like specifically day to day is going to change. Technologies, the frameworks, all of those things tend to be different depending on where it is that you're working. But I will go into that in just a little bit. So soft skills. Above all else, as a problem solver, they want you to be able to help them to solve their problems, but you then have to explain to them how to implement it, how that's going to work, right? So I think that the biggest skill that you're going to need as a cybersecurity consultant is being able to explain technical information to non-technical stakeholders. So what does this look like, right? You may have a CEO who is developing a program or a product or something, and they're trying to push it out. I had a company that was basically being acquired by one of the major tech companies. And in order to do that, they had to pass a pen test and a security review in order for them to go through with the acquisition. So this owner was basically saying, hey, I need to basically pass this pen test and basically show that I don't have any major vulnerabilities, right? So, they weren't necessarily the most technical people, but they need to understand what it is that you find and why they care, right? So if you say, like, for example, hey, you have this cross-site scripting vulnerability, right? That might not mean anything to them. You have to explain why they care. So you have to be able to say, hey, if somebody were able to exploit this vulnerability, then they're able to get access to all of your sensitive information, like out of your database, like your credit cards, things of that nature. You have to be able to explain to them why it is that you care. Why is it they care? You shouldn't assume that whoever is going to be on, excuse me, whoever's going to be on the other side of the proverbial table, because you could be doing this remotely, that they are going to understand very technical things. So you should have excellent organization and documentation skills, right? So even though when you typically brief and tell companies about what it is that you find, it's at a high level. So it's at an executive summary level, which is meant for your high level executives. But generally, they're going to hand the report over to somebody who is very technical, and they need to, one, understand what it is that you did, understand, number two, figure out how you came to your conclusions. And then number three, they need to be able to reproduce it. So it's very important that you follow like the classic, fix or it didn't happen, and this is how you steps to reproduce. So like things that are typically typical, like for example, if you come from like a software testing background. So excellent oral, written, and presentation skills. I tell people all the time, and it's only half joking now, that if you give me a presentation on any topic, that I can present it, at a moment's notice. Because realistically, as a consultant, again, your success is going to depend on your ability to be able to talk about what it is that you found. The high level information should be found in the slides themselves. And so I'll tell somebody, like, hey, I'm sick, I can't make it to a readout, just give me the slides. Because, realistically, you need to be able to explain. And it's okay if you don't have all the answers. You just need to be able to say, hey, I don't know, but I can get back to you. Because as you deliver your results, that's not the final, be all and say all. The client has to formally accept the results. So if there are outstanding items, then you have to go back and check with the team or the person who actually wrote the slides. You can get that information and get it back to them. But for the most part, you should just be able to, talk about what it is that's displayed and be able to answer questions. Most of the questions will probably be like, hey, what does this actually mean? What is it that you're saying to me? Again, problem solving. I can't overstate this enough. It's very important that you be able to, at least talk about how it is that you're approaching problem solving, and that it makes sense, right? So you want to be able to help them to solve their problems and think about things that they didn't necessarily think of. This is like one of those cases where it is not a problem for you to think outside the box or to think unconventionally about how to solve a problem, because that's really what they're hiring you for. And then I would also say self-direction, being able to work independently. And this is very important because I have been on engagements as a consultant where I am technical lead and the only person that's on the engagement. So that just means that I'm doing all of the work. And then being the technical lead just basically means that you are the person who's doing the readout to the client at the end of the day. If you have more than one person or more than one consultant that's on a particular task, which depending on what type of work that you're doing, there could be, you might have a technical lead and then you might have other people as well. It really just depends on how big of an engagement that you're working And when I talk about engagement, for the most part, as a consultant, unless you're like working specifically for a particular company, for the most part, consultants, like, they have different clients week after week. So what that means is that you may be hired by a specific company. So let's say there's a lot of different consulting companies out here. Some people talk about like the Big Four. I think it's like Deloitte and Ernst and Young. So you may work for like a Deloitte, say, for example, or even I think AWS actually has a consulting firm as well. So you may work for AWS, but you are actually hired out by another company that is specifically, for example, implementing something, and then they need your expertise, right? So that just means that you're going to go solve those problems that week, and then the next week you may have something else, which means that you have to be very adaptable, right? You are going to get thrown into a situation where you maybe don't have the best context. You maybe don't have the history of what's happened, but you come in with ideas and the ability to solve problems. So pay and the perks. I think this is my favorite part about being a cybersecurity consultant, is the pay and the perks. So for the most part, cybersecurity consultants make somewhere between $80 to $300 an hour. So when you get to people who are making the $300 an hour, that is basically what the, for example, the AWSs of the world, the consulting companies of the world are billing you out to their clients, right? Now, what you may actually get is probably closer to that $80, $90 an hour. It really depends. Or if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you can open up your own consulting company, and then you can bill out, whatever it is that you want to do. If you work as a consultant for a company, let's say like an AWS or like one of the other consulting companies, in your salary, you probably make somewhere between $85,000 to $200,000 or more. I know some consultants that are, especially in the penetration testing field, that are more senior level, who command, upwards of $250,000, $300,000 a year, right? And again, for those folks, they're probably getting billed out at, probably closer to 300 or higher an hour. Flexible hours. Most companies, do like a 9 to 5, but when we're talking about doing security assessments, or we're talking about doing like vulnerability analysis or assessing risks, it may not necessarily need to be done with a 9 to 5. And depending on whether or not the company has, for example, a non-production environment for you to be able to do your analysis, most of the time companies will have you actually do your pen test on a production environment, in which case they maybe don't want it done during like their optimal working hours, which means you may be asked to do it in night times and weekends, or you may be asked to do it over the weekends. I've had both of those happen typically. So you have flexible hours. You don't necessarily have to do it, only between the hours of 9 to 5. And it's typically not the same work day in and day out. Like I said, because you're working as a consultant, you're going to different places and solving different problems. So it's not like you're going and, helping somebody implement, something, the same thing each day or each week. The work typically changes. So on the right-hand side here, I have the highest paying salaries for security consultants in the United States. So you'll see, of course, like areas like New York are pretty high. On here, we see DC, North Carolina, and Houston, Texas are some of the highest. For the most part, unless you are, in an area, in a market that is like we call them -10 markets, but it has like a lower cost of living. For the most part, you're making at least $85,000 a year. Some of the top companies also for hiring security consultants, Amazon, AWS, and some other companies as well. So there are a lot of different companies who do this. This is specifically for security consultants, that title, but there are also people who say senior security consultant or security consultant level 2. The company I worked at, they start you off at an associate level. You do that for about a year, and then you move to a security consultant, and then there's a senior and then principal, and you go up from there. So there's room for growth as a consultant. And there are a lot of people, like I said, that are doing this type of work. So what is a week in the life? I don't say necessarily a day in the life because, like I said, every day is different, but generally your weeks tend to look about the same. So each week is typically a different customer. Typically engagements are about 1 to 2 weeks. So if you're spending, for example, 2 weeks doing an engagement, which is whatever it is that they ask you to do, you'll do that for 2 weeks, and then you'll spend maybe 8 to 16 hours on the back end writing a report. Okay. The report is almost, if not more important than the actual work that you did, because realistically, they're going to pay more attention to, your high level executive summary than they actually will, like, all of the mundane details that you may have put in there. It's important, like I said, that it be reproducible, that it be clear at an executive level, especially in the executive summary area, and that they understand the impact of what it is that you found. So at the end, there's a readout. So a readout, there's generally a minimum of 2 meetings that you're going to have. You're going to have a kickoff meeting, which is typically the week before you start. And that's when you're expected to talk to the customer, find out what it is that they are interested in. You want to find out what they care about, because depending on what the purpose is for the engagement will tell you what it is that they're looking for, whether that's something specific. And the reason being is if you find this, or you see specific vulnerabilities that you're like, hey, I want to investigate this more, but it's not something that they're going to care about. Like they'll probably care if you have like sensitive data exposure, or if you have something that is going to be a very high or critical level severity. But if it's something that is relatively low severity, they may not care about it, right? So that's why it's important for you to understand the business reason for why it is they're doing the work, right? Because again, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that they find value in what it is that you're doing. There may be a retest, right? So there have been times where I've been asked to basically test for 2 weeks. I have findings and I provide them. If they have critical or high severity defects or vulnerabilities, then they're going to have to go and fix those. And most of the time when someone is doing for example, if we're talking about like a pen test, specifically, if they're doing a pen test, it's because they have a compliance reason to be able to be doing it, which means that they have to be able to pass it, right? So they will have to make, corrective actions, and then you'll have to retest to make sure that those vulnerabilities have been resolved, right? So, you may find like, hey, I did this for 2 weeks, and then there's a readout, and then, they have to go back to the drawing board, and they may come back to you, a couple of weeks, a month later, and say, hey, could you test again? But that works for you because again, you get paid, more money in order to continue doing that. So you may find that a client may try to either raise or lower your severities. You should be reasonable, but you should stick to your guns. And the reason why I say either try to raise or lower the severity is because if you find something and you say, for example, that it is a medium. Give me 1 second. If you find a vulnerability and you say that it is a medium severity, they may say, I can't make my executive decisions or my executive team take corrective action on something that's a medium, right? So they may say, hey, I need this to be at least a high in order for me to get them to do something about it. So in that case, they may say, hey, I need you to raise the severity. I have never complained about them raising a severity, right? Because, I think that it should be resolved. And so, raising a severity doesn't, in any way affect the trying to think of the word, how well the report is actually reflecting what I found, right? I have also had clients who've asked me to reduce the severity. So like, hey, this is critical, this could lead to sensitive data exposure. Like, see, I was able to get access to your email, and, here's an email that you sent somebody that was important, right? And they may say, oh, critical seems a little high because, really there's not anything important in mind. Email, I think this should be a higher. I think it should be a medium, right? And they may try to get you to lower the severity, but again, in general, you should use your best judgment. So, there may be many reasons for clients to, try to push you in one way or the other, but you should just be aware that, there may be like a little negotiation before you finalize the report. So it's not like the movies, right? Whenever you see, for example, like a hacking or a consulting thing in the movies, you may have somebody who maybe like flies out on a Monday, they maybe come back on a Thursday night or so, and it makes it seem very glamorous, especially like if you are doing something in, for example, the pen testing world. So they don't expect you just to identify vulnerabilities and be done, right? I was very largely self-taught when I was coming up as a baby hacker. And I can tell you that when you identify vulnerabilities, for example, on like a try hack me or a hack the box or one of those things, right? You just identify the vulnerabilities, and if you get root or whatever your goal is for those types of activities, you declare victory and you move on, right? So in the real world, they don't just want you to identify the vulnerabilities and be done, right? They don't care that you say, hey, that's a cross-site scripting, that's a cross-site request forgery, whatever the thing is, they don't care about that. What they care about is, how do you mitigate it? How do they fix it? How do I resolve this issue, right? So in that case, they're kind of expecting you to be both the developer and then also the consultant, right? Because they need to know how to go back to their actual developers and tell them, how to resolve the issue. And they need a good idea of the impact, right? So if we don't fix this, what's the worst case scenario? They want to see a proof of concept, right? So, if you do a vulnerability scammer, for example, or use like some dynamic scanning tools, for example, and it comes up and it says, hey, we think that this has a particular vulnerability, right? It's not enough to just say, hey, this has, SQL injection, right? You have to actually exploit the database, develop a proof of concept, or find a proof of concept, get the data out of the database, and then show them like, hey, here's, somebody's credit card, right? So it's not enough to say, hey, here's the vulnerability. You have to, one, tell them, how to fix it, and two, explain to them why they care. Like, hey, this is somebody's whole credit card number. This is the bad, right? But again, this requires that you ask what they care most about at the beginning. If you know the motivations for why it is that they're asking for consulting services in the first place, then that'll help you to focus your results specific on the things that you care about, right? So if you know that they care about data exposure, then you showing them that you have somebody's credit card number out of the database, or that it's in clear text, for example, that is going to be something that makes them feel like it's worth. I call it the price of admission, but like it's worth paying for you. Don't spend too much time going down the rabbit hole, right? There have been times where I've spent a lot of time, like, and I'm finding something and I'm like, I'm trying to do this. All of the proof of concepts that are on like a vulnerability database are not working. I can't find anything that works. Like, you shouldn't spend a whole bunch of time. If you have a reasonable degree of confidence that the thing is exploitable, but you just weren't able to do that, then you should say that, right? You should say, hey, this was flagged as being possible for example, a SQL injection. I wasn't able to actually get it out because there might be, like, for example, an appliance, or there might be something that's, preventing you from being able to do it. But then you should just say that, right? So they're at least aware that the vulnerability is there. The infrastructures, the technologies, the toolkits, the frameworks are always different. I have seen websites that have been made in Ruby. I've seen websites that have been made in like COBOL. Like, there's so many different languages and technologies and things that people have asked you should do, that it's not like you're expected to be a master of all of the things. At some point, I got an actual like mainframe engagement, which was crazy because like I had done a workshop on it before, but I was like, why would I see that in real life? But then I actually saw it in real life. So it's not that you're expected to know all of the things, because it may be different, and nobody's expected to be a jack of all trades. Which leads me to my next point, which is interesting is that you have the right to refuse work. When I first started as a security consultant, my manager was on a particular project, or he was assigned a particular project, and it was for a country that he didn't necessarily agree with their policies and procedures. He didn't agree with their, human rights issues. So he said, hey, I don't want to be on this engagement. And most companies will allow you to refuse which work that you're on. So like if you have a moral issue with, for example, supporting work in certain countries or certain companies or whatever the case may be, as a consultant, you don't necessarily have to do that. If you, for example, go and work for a specific company and they're like, hey, you got to do this work, you got to do the work. And if you don't do the work, they'll probably fire you. But as a consultant, you have a little bit more flexibility. You can also ask for the type of work that you're interested in working on. When I started as a consultant, I came in with web application pen testing skills. I said, hey, I would really like to do some mobile things. So they gave me basically a weeks long mobile penetration testing course. And then I got to work on, mobile penetration testing projects, right? As a consultant, you can, say, hey, this is what I want to work on. This is what I'm interested in. And the other thing, which is cool, is that as a consultant, most companies will also allow you to have the ability to be able to do things like research. Like if you're interested in looking at vulnerabilities on certain types of technologies or certain types of infrastructures. So you have a little bit of flexibility to be able to look at different things that you're interested in. Again, you're not expected to know all of the things about all of the things, right? It's okay that you go in, specifically and say, hey, I'm a network penetration tester, or hey, I'm a web application pen tester, or I'm a SOC analyst, I'm experienced in incident response, whatever the case may be. It's okay for you to go in like that because they need help in all of the things, and they just have different consultants who do the different things. And for me, this is a perk. It may not be for you. You may be expected to travel. I've seen people who are able to, pre-COVID as a consultant, actually, go in on a Monday, leave out on a Thursday, to visit different places, different countries. It really depends. There was one engagement that, everybody wanted to go on every year, and it was basically doing physical and web penetration tests for cruise lines. So they actually got to go and, live on the cruise and see what they could do. So there's a lot of different, opportunities for you to be able to do different types of work. It really just depends on, who your company's clients are. And I think that is it. So I will open up for questions if anybody has any.
First, I want to talk about the other side. So, Tanisha is the tech side, right? And she's the hacker. I'm the lawyer. And so as a consultant, and I've done consulting work before, I don't go in and try to hack in the system. I go in and perform assessments from a non-technical perspective to be able to bring the client information about their overall controls, right? So whether or not they have the right security policy, whether or not they if they say that their password policy is this, that from a technical perspective, you do an assessment on the back end to see if it follows. So consulting can be a range of different things. And I want you to understand that I'm listening to Tanisha and I'm like, yeah, she's so far into the technical aspect of things, but you come talk to Mary. Mary's a lawyer. She's like, yeah, no, I'm looking at contracts. I'm looking at whether or not the third party vendors are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I'm looking at, what type of controls that they have in place. Are they doing what they say they're going to do? Which is, it's on the opposite side of that. Of course, we all bring different experiences, but all of those experiences are necessary in cybersecurity. So, I mean, as you look at things, and you guys can go back and watch our video that I did actually in January on the how to hunt for a cybersecurity role and different types of roles that are out there. And it runs the gamut. It comes from, your penetration tester, your reverse engineer, your security, your software engineer, all the way to the other side. Because once I left the FBI, I became a director and I became a manager. So I was not hands-on and did not care that I was not hands-on because I ran teams that were hands-on. So for instance, Tanisha was talking about you have all these vulnerabilities, severe, different severity scales of vulnerability, critical, high, medium, and low, right? She's doing that and she's writing that report. These are critical, these are high, these are medium, these low. I'm telling my team, okay, you just dump that piece of paper, that report on a technical team and add that to their things to do list. You have to make sense out of it, right? So what I would do is I would go in and take what the results of the pen test was, and I would say, hey, okay, these are internet facing applications. There's no go here, right? You have to do it, right? And so I would look at it from it's critical, but if it's not internet facing, the critical is reduced, right? And so what I mean by internet facing, meaning anybody can get access to it, right? You www, drop an IP address in there, you drop something. If you actually have the capability of getting it from the internet and there's a critical vulnerability on it, that critical, it means more to me than something that's sitting, that doesn't have that's sitting in the back end of, Mary's office, not connected to any type, it doesn't even have Wi-Fi. It's not there. So that critical vulnerability of that piece of hardware, it's critical, yes. But when it comes to communicating to the teams about whether or not this is necessary for them to do right now, those are the types of things that I would do. So understanding what the individuals, the pen testers did was important to be able to, as an executive, add that glean to it. Because I'm telling you right now, if you go to a tech team and tell them you have 400 vulnerabilities and all of them are critical, there's nothing going to get done with them. There's nothing. So you have to make sense out of it for them. So I was the make sense out of them person, right? I always sat in the middle of the technical teams, sometimes even the legal teams and the folks that were performing all of these security assessments to be able to say, okay, this is what we really need to do, right? And that ultimately, that's the purpose of your manager, your director, your CISO, to make sense and to be able to go out and let them know, okay, this is what we really need to get done, and we can wait 6 months on this, but this needs to be done in the first 90 days, and it's non-negotiable. And if you go to them like that, then you're more likely to be able to create the necessary relationship that you need to get some of your initiatives passed within an organization. So, I mean, as a consultant, I've come in and I've done these risk assessments and I've written these reports, and I usually give it a business look, overview, right? So, if they say they have a GDPR requirements, GDPR is an EU data privacy law. If they say, okay, we're B2B, business to business, your data, I'm a vendor to you. So you are the primary, I collect the data, Tanisha is my vendor. The requirements on me pass down to Tanisha. However, the way she secures that data may be different from the way that I have to secure that data, because the customer doesn't know Tanisha exists. They don't know that Tanisha could be a processor. They're interacting with Mary. So it's Mary's responsibility to make sure your data is safe. Whatever controls, technical, organizational policies, procedures are in place, Tanisha has to follow them, but the customer's not going to go to Tanisha because the customer may not even know Tanisha exists. So there are all these things, and I've always looked at consultancy and that, guys, and understanding the business, what you're doing for a business and how that relates. Whether if you're a small business, but all you do is collect personal data, that risk profile is higher than, you're a small business that sells widgets and, you use a payment processor. So all of that to be said, cybersecurity, as we will continue to learn, it's a whole lot of different things, and there's a whole lot of different areas that are non-technical and those that are technical that can allow you to make a successful career in this space. And so, the consultant realm is one of those things. Like I didn't I wasn't a consultant. I internally, like I didn't work for one of the big five. I hung my own shingle. I have that entrepreneurial spirit. So I tended to hang my own shingle, and I still do some stuff, with other companies, with my clients and things like that. So just wanted to let you guys know that there is a broad range, a swath of things that's available to individuals in this space. If you are in healthcare and you're a nurse, I'm telling you right now, I would love to talk to you, turn you into a HIPAA compliance officer, because that's something that's needed and things like that. So wherever your book of experience, and if you're new to the cybersecurity space, there's a cybersecurity tint to everything that's going on out there today. So I'm gonna let anybody out there, if you're gonna raise your hands. Do we have any questions?
I just want to say, like, if you're relatively new to the industry, you have the ability to define, what your niche is going to be. You have the ability to say, I want to, for example, work at the intersection of, for example, healthcare and cybersecurity, or at the intersection of, like, maybe, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. You get to define, what verticals, like what type of sectors you work for. You get to define all of those things. And as you continue to get experience, you, through your resume, through your LinkedIn, through your interviewing, get to craft a narrative about what it is and how you define yourself and what your area of expertise is, right? And I think that as long as you are able to sell that narrative to a company, whether it's a big consulting corporation, or if it's even a smaller shop, or if you decide to do your own, as long as you can sell that narrative to your clients about why it is that they need your expertise, then that will allow you to be an individual in a space of many different types of consultants. So you don't have to, feel like you have to be a pen test, or that you have to do whatever, right? Like Mary said, I'm very much, hands on keyboards in the day-to-day, right? But when we look at the overall spectrum of cybersecurity, you have the lawyers, you have marketing people, you have accounting people, you have so many different job functions under the cybersecurity umbrella that you can be a consultant for, right? So you don't have to feel like, hey, I'm not a programmer, or I'm not good at programming, so I can't do this, right? I don't want that to be your takeaway at all. There are so many different things that people need security consultants for. So, like I said, you can do what you want to do in the space as long as there's a need for it. And then you just have to be able to, craft that narrative through your resume, through your conversations with the recruiters and the hiring managers, so that they know what it is that you bring.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading an article today, so I go back and forth about AI, and you and I both know that, and if you don't know, and I'm going to tell you, AI typically, when it turns on, becomes biased, right? Because it is actually learning from our, let's say US, they turn it on, it goes out there and it learns. And they were talking about hiring practices and how, they're going to start asking AI companies to identify organizations if the results of their AI produces a bias, right? And I'm just sitting there, and I'm as I'm reading this article, because it's well known. It's well known. It's been documented that if you're using AI in hiring practices, the AI is just going to learn what you've already done. So the AI is not going to fix your problem, especially if you have a problem with diversity. The AI is just going to learn that you have a problem with diversity. It's not going to be able to now add this, it's not going to be able to prevent the fact that you hired this way, right? And because it's looking at your previous hiring practices to learn how you're going to hire in the future. So I was just listening to that. I was reading that, and I was just thinking to myself, there's a whole nother realm of understanding when it comes to algorithms and understanding how algorithms work. And there is a lack of diversity in the development of those algorithms, but the result of it, right? So now you're going to have a whole bunch of litigation. Lawyers are going to get paid because companies are hiring, organizations to run their recruitment platforms or whatever, but they're not getting any visibility into the algorithm. So if all I tell people that come to minorities in cybersecurity, if the result of what you're doing results in an all white male staff, then there's something wrong with how you're making your decisions when the result ends up be this way. And so you have to, think outside the box and do this. But there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed when it comes to technology, IT, cybersecurity, and unfortunately, the legal aspect of things tends to run behind the security aspect of things, but IT moves so much faster than we're able to respond to. So it's just really interesting to see what's out there. It doesn't seem like we have any questions. Tanisha, did you have any final thoughts before we close out?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I just got an example of what you were just saying just now. Some companies will use like an AI, like a facial recognition to, pick up facial cues. So they'll have you do, for example, a video in your interview, right? So these same systems have been notorious. Like I think the error rates for Black women is something like 30%, right? They're okay if they can pick up like facial recognition or facial, they can actually identify, between like different white men, for example, right? But among Black women, 70% of the time it is correct. But the implication for this in the hiring is that they may feel like they pick up something that makes a certain narrative about Black women. Or if we take this and put it over to the healthcare or to the criminal justice perspective, it could be that we have Black women who are being convicted of crimes based off of it being 70% sure this is the same Black woman that was seen in the video, right? So we need more people in the AI, in the machine learning aspect, so that we are hopefully getting less biased systems. And I think that's probably the reason why I will hop on so many soapboxes to tell people that we need to start getting people earlier in their careers, especially like in a K-12 space, because if we're going to see long-term downstream impacts to algorithms, we need people to actually go to school and study the math with the emphasis in cybersecurity, or go to school and study the algorithms or the data structure, or whatever the case may be. So if you are relatively early in your career, like I said, you have the ability to be able to craft and describe, what impact that you want to make within your career. So you get to, go work for employers that are doing things in a space that is interesting to you. So, I would say while you're asking employers to consider you for a position, that you also flip the script and figure out whether or not they would be a good fit for what it is that you're trying to do, right? Not just look at them, for example, for their name recognition, but, what are their values? What are they working on? And how are they helping to make a better, future for our industry? I think that's also very important when you're considering, who do you want to go work for?
Yeah, absolutely. When I tell people all the time, when you are interviewing, you're interviewing that company as well. And some people come to cybersecurity with this idea that they're, all this is just a way that I can make a lot of money. And that's not wrong. But the answer to that question would be, but why, right? Because I'm here to tell you, I know you don't believe me. I know you guys are aspirers. You may be young in your career. There will come a time in your career that there is not amount of money that you can receive that's going to make you happy, right? And that's just the bottom line. So what are you doing it for? What are you in it for? And having something meaningful attached to what you're doing matters, right? That's why I point people especially when they're transitioning, I say, what did you do for a living? And then let's add a cybersecurity tilt to it, right? Because no, you don't have to go out and get all of these certifications in order to be impactful or in order to be able to do something in this space. You don't need all of that if you know what you want to do. But a lot of times people don't really know what they want to do. But thank you, Tanisha, for this talk. The consulting talk was a wonderful talk, and I always learn a lot from you anytime you speak. And thank you for those that are here live. Thank you for those that are watching this as a recording. We appreciate the love. Tanisha will be back on the 24th. We'll be having another topic on the 24th of March, right before the conference. And then in April starts AWS. We'll start having some AWS presentations monthly, started in April. So look forward to that. Be on the lookout for that. But thank you guys so much for joining us. And we'll see you again next time. Bye.